The coup of 18 Brumaire, Napoleon seizes power. The French Republic was exhausted. By the autumn of 1799, a decade after the Bastille fell, the nation found itself adrift in a sea of political instability, economic decay, and pervasive war weariness. The revolution had promised liberty and equality, but it had delivered the terror, the Directory, and chronic indecision. Governing France was the Directory, a five-man executive body that had become a byword for incompetence, corruption, and parliamentary deadlock. The Directory survived only through continuous military intervention, nullifying elections and suppressing popular unrest, a system that was unsustainable and fundamentally lacked legitimacy. The public yearned for order, for stability, for a strong hand to end the cycle of chaos. The political vacuum was immense. The Directory faced threats from both the resurgent royalists who sought to restore the monarchy and the radical Jacobins who desired a return to the violent egalitarianism of the Terror. The economic reality was dire. State finances were in shambles, inflation was rampant, and the collection of taxes was disorganized and inefficient. Furthermore, the war against the second coalition of European powers, Austria, Britain, Russia, was going badly. French armies had been pushed back across Italy and Germany, threatening the Republic's hard-won territorial gains. The atmosphere was ripe for a strongman to emerge. The stage for the coup was not set by the army, but by the disillusioned politicians who believed the existing constitution of Year 3 was unworkable. The key conspirators were Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, the veteran revolutionary theorist who famously asked, "What is the Third Estate?" and Roger Ducos, both members of the ruling Directory. Sieyès believed the Republic could only be saved by a fundamental revision of the Constitution, a change that required a temporary military strongman to enact. He viewed the army not as a source of power, but as a necessary surgical instrument to remove the cancerous Directory. Sieyès initially considered several generals, but most proved unsuitable, lacking either the necessary popularity or the ruthlessness. The search for a suitable savior was intense and urgent. Then, in October 1799, news electrified Paris. General Napoleon Bonaparte had returned. Napoleon's return from the disastrous but mythologized Egyptian campaign was providential. The deputies, realizing they had been tricked into leaving the safety of Paris, began to question the legality of the entire proceedings. The Jacobins feared a return to a dictatorship similar to the one under Robespierre, and they were determined to defend the Constitution of Year 3. The Council of 500 demanded assurances and delays, which directly threatened the conspirators' essential need for speed. The coup was designed to be swift and bloodless, relying on intimidation and legal trickery, not outright violence. The legislative resistance was much stronger than Sieyès and Napoleon had anticipated. They realized that merely securing resignations and moving the location was insufficient. They needed a clear, decisive action from the legislature to appoint the new provisional executive, the three consuls, before the opposition could regroup and declare the entire operation illegal. Napoleon, frustrated by the political stalling and never comfortable with the intricacies of legislative debate, decided to intervene personally and decisively.
a massive miscalculation of his political power versus his military fame. Napoleon first entered the Council of Elders, where he gave a rambling, incoherent speech denying any intent to establish a dictatorship and swearing to protect the Republic. He faced harsh questioning from deputies demanding proof of the alleged Jacobin plot that had served as the pretext for the entire move. His speech lacked the clarity and decisiveness of his battlefield orders, and it failed to persuade the assembled politicians. His next intervention was a critical point of no return. Accompanied by 4 grenadiers, Napoleon marched into the Council of 500, the chamber dominated by his most vocal opponents. This act, a general entering the legislative floor surrounded by armed soldiers, was an outrageous violation of civilian authority and constitutional norms. The moment Napoleon appeared, the Jacobin deputies erupted in fury. The moment Napoleon appeared in the Council of 500, the chamber erupted into unparalleled chaos and fury. The Jacobin deputies, realizing they were facing a military takeover, rose instantly. Shouts of "Down with the dictator" and "Outlaw him! Outlaw him!" the same phrase used to condemn Robespierre, echoed throughout the orangery. Deputies physically rushed the general, surrounding him.
The scene was one of extreme disorder. Napoleon, accustomed only to the discipline of the battlefield, was unprepared for the raw, unpredictable violence of political debate. In the resulting struggle, he was reportedly grabbed, pushed, and nearly overwhelmed by the enraged legislators. Some accounts even suggest a dagger was raised. Napoleon's grenadiers quickly intervened, pulling their general, who was reportedly stammering and pale with shock, out of the chamber and into the waiting crowd of soldiers outside. Napoleon's personal intervention was a political and oratorical failure. He had failed to win over the legislators and, worse, had confirmed their deepest fears about military dictatorship. The situation was teetering on the brink of collapse. The conspiracy had successfully dissolved the Directory, but it now faced the real risk of the Council of 500 declaring Napoleon an outlaw, which would immediately authorize any good Republican soldier to execute him. Sieyès, the mastermind, watched the debacle with icy professional contempt. He knew the constitutional pretense had failed and the time for surgical precision was over. The coup had become a street fight and only brute force could save them. He famously advised Napoleon, "They want to put you outside the law. It is time to put them outside the room." The critical figure who saved the coup from disaster was not Napoleon himself, but his younger brother, Lucien Bonaparte, the president of the Council of 500. Lucien, possessing the political eloquence and manipulative skill his brother lacked, desperately tried to restore order and defend Napoleon, but the deputies ignored his gavel. Realizing the vote to outlaw Napoleon was imminent, Lucien took a desperate, highly theatrical step. The crucial figure who saved the coup from collapse on the 19th Brumaire was not Napoleon, but his younger brother, Lucien Bonaparte, the president of the Council of 500. Recognizing that the Jacobin deputies were moments away from declaring Napoleon an outlaw, a death sentence, Lucien refused to put the motion to a vote despite the intense chaos and furious demands. He desperately tried to restore order and defend his brother, but the legislators ignored his gavel. Realizing that verbal defense was useless and that his constitutional authority was vanishing, Lucien made a desperate, highly theatrical move.
He dramatically stripped off his official presidential toga and left the chamber, denouncing the Jacobin deputies inside as assassins and representatives of the dagger, accusing them of attempting to murder the general and overthrow the Republic's government. This was a complete and blatant lie, but it was a politically brilliant stroke of propaganda executed at the perfect moment. Outside the orangery, Lucien rushed to Napoleon and the waiting soldiers. Facing the troops, he delivered an impassioned, fabricated speech. He declared that the majority of the Council of 500 was being terrorized by a few Jacobin fanatics armed with daggers, and that the deputies had attempted to assassinate their general. He then took out his own sword, held it dramatically to Napoleon's chest, and swore an oath. He promised to personally stab his own brother if Napoleon ever threatened the liberty of the French people. This performance, a theatrical blend of loyalty and fear-mongering, instantly transformed the situation in the eyes of the troops. The soldiers, who had heard the shouting from inside the building and feared for their popular general's safety, believed Lucien's tale of the Jacobin daggers. Napoleon, having recovered from his political shock, now had the moral and fabricated legal justification he needed. He gave the order to act. Napoleon, now possessing the theatrical justification provided by his brother Lucien's fabricated story of the Jacobin attack, gave the decisive order. The soldiers, particularly the grenadiers of the Legislative Guard, who had witnessed the shouting and believed their general had been assaulted, were ready. Napoleon commanded General Joachim Murat, his flamboyant cavalry commander and future brother-in-law, to clear the hall. Murat marched his troops toward the orangery, where the Council of 500 was still meeting. The troops entered the chamber with drums beating, the sound deafening and terrifying to the unarmed legislators. The soldiers, with bayonets fixed, advanced slowly and methodically across the floor. The deputies, who had attempted to defend the Republic with debates and votes, were no match for the armed force. The scene dissolved into utter panic. Jacobin deputies attempted to fight. Others tried to appeal to the soldiers' revolutionary loyalty, and the rest scattered, many escaping through the windows of the orangery and across the grounds of St. Cloud.
The chamber was swiftly and decisively cleared of the opposition. The complete military expulsion of the Council of 500 was the true, final act of the coup of 18 Brumaire. It was the moment the French Revolution, which had begun with high-minded constitutional debates, ended unequivocally with the triumph of the military sword over the civilian law. Now that the opposition was literally gone, the conspirators, Sieyès, Ducos, and Lucien, needed to restore a facade of legality. They quickly gathered the few remaining compliant deputies from both the Council of Elders and the now shattered Council of 500, a small, terrified rump assembly. Under the direct threat and supervision of the military, this compliant minority voted to formally abolish the Directory and sanctioned the creation of a new provisional executive body composed of 3 individuals, the consuls. The 3 consuls initially appointed were Sieyès, Ducos, and Napoleon Bonaparte. The appointment of the 3 provisional consuls, Sieyès, Ducos, and Napoleon Bonaparte, immediately following the military expulsion of the legislature, marked the end of the Directory and the beginning of the consulate. However, the power dynamic among the 3 was never truly equal. Sieyès, the political mastermind, had planned for a new system where he would remain the dominant political force, utilizing Napoleon only as the temporary strongman needed to execute the constitutional change.
Sieyès had envisioned a complex, highly intellectualized constitution designed to ensure political stability without allowing a single dictator to emerge. Napoleon, though, had no intention of being merely a ceremonial sword. He viewed the consulate not as a temporary executive body to facilitate constitutional debate, but as his vehicle to absolute control. The moment the three consuls began drafting the new constitution of Year 8, the political struggle commenced, and Napoleon's superior will and public popularity proved decisive. Sieyès proposed a system where the executive power would be diffused, checked by multiple assemblies, and led by two consuls who were politically weak. Napoleon instantly rejected this complexity. He demanded a powerful, centralized executive led by a single figure. He utilized his immense popularity among the military and the common people to exert pressure, arguing that only he possessed the authority and military prestige to guarantee peace and stability after a decade of revolution.
trong quân sự, Napoleon methodically outmaneuvered Sieyès. Sieyès realized too late that he had chosen a master, not a mere instrument. Napoleon ensured that the new constitution vested nearly all real executive power in the hands of the first consul. The constitution was rapidly drafted and approved, effectively establishing a military dictatorship disguised in civilian clothes. Napoleon quickly moved to cement his supremacy. While Sieyès was technically named a consul, his political career was effectively over. Napoleon offered Sieyès a handsome bribe, a vast estate, as compensation for his revolutionary service and theoretical genius. Sieyès accepted the payment, a quiet admission of defeat, ending his revolutionary career not with a political victory, but with a wealthy retirement. Ducas was a political lightweight and posed no threat. The position of first consul, initially conceived as merely a provisional role, was now exclusively Napoleon's. The coup of 18 Brumaire, therefore, was not merely a change of government. It was the decisive moment the revolution betrayed its foundational principle of civilian rule. The military, the creation of the Republic, had consumed its creator. The coup of 18 Brumaire, while initially conceived as a necessary political reform to stabilize the Republic, was ultimately the definitive moment. The French Revolution, which had begun with high-minded constitutional ideals, ended unequivocally in the triumph of the military sword over the civilian law. The actions of Napoleon and Lucien Bonaparte in the Orangerie confirmed that in revolutionary France, power flowed not from the legislative assembly, but from the bayonet. The immediate aftermath was a period of intense, controlled public relations designed to legitimize the illegal seizure of power. The conspirators presented the coup not as an overthrow, but as a surgical intervention to rescue the Republic from the twin dangers of Jacobin anarchy and royalist tyranny. The public, exhausted by a decade of instability, violence, and economic hardship, readily accepted this narrative. They cared less about the legality of the new constitution and far more about the promise of order, peace, and stable governance that Napoleon represented. The coup was ratified by a plebiscite, a direct vote of the people, which, while heavily manipulated, showed overwhelming public support for Napoleon's continued rule. The establishment of the consulate, with Napoleon as first consul, immediately yielded profound consequences. Firstly, it brought an end to the chronic political paralysis of the Directory. The new government was centralized, efficient, and decisive, allowing France to quickly regain the initiative in the wars against the Second Coalition. Secondly, it ushered in a period of intense domestic reform, including the restructuring of the nation's chaotic finances, the establishment of the Bank of France, and the beginnings of the monumental legal project that would become the Napoleonic Code. These reforms provided the enduring stability and infrastructure the revolution had failed to build. Historically, the coup of 18 Brumaire holds immense significance. It demonstrated that military success could be translated directly into political authority, setting a dangerous precedent for future generations of ambitious generals. It marked the definitive death of the Revolutionary Republic and its fragile democratic experiments, replacing them with an efficient, authoritarian government. Napoleon, the outsider who had once despised the French monarchy, had seized control of the revolution's legacy, channeling its immense energy and resources not towards abstract political ideals, but towards personal power and military conquest. The era of the general was now the era of the state.